Welcome, Letchworth detectives. I'm Conrad. I'm an outdoor educator with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation at Letchworth State Park, and today I have a mystery for you. I'm standing here at the Glen Iris Fountain, which became real famous about 6 years ago when the fountain froze almost up to its full height of about 50 feet. Today it's almost that tall. It's becoming really popular with our visitors, and I think we can use some clues and some physics know-how to figure out how the fountain works and why it turns into such a giant ice sculpture in really cold years. First, we notice that the fountain is right next to the historic home of William Pryor Letchworth, the Glen Iris Inn. So the William Pryor Letchworth Museum might be a good place to start looking. In the museum, we have old documents, old papers that show that the fountain was one of the first things that William Pryor Letchworth had built when he was designing this fancy property here, all the gardens and the grounds. The fountain was using the technology of the time, which in the early 1860s was before airplanes, before cars, even before motorboats. There was no kind of engine or motor at that time that could operate underwater. So this fountain uses some kind of trick, an engineering trick, that was available to them in the 1860s. Old documentation tells us that the fountain used to use the water from just up the hill next to what is now the council grounds area of the park. But that pond used to dry up, and the pipes from that pond used to get gummed up with mud every so often. It was pretty inconvenient and hard to use and hard to keep open. They decided to build a new pond even further uphill from that at Trout Pond. Here at Trout Pond is the last clue that we need to figure out how the Glen Iris Fountain works. The pond slowly drains to about where my feet are. When it gets to the edge of the pond, flows down across the path here, underneath our feet, and slowly trickles downhill down towards the fountain. Before it gets there, it enters a pipe, and that pipe goes underground, straight down the hill and to the Glen Iris Fountain. And gravity is pulling that water down the hill, down into the pipe. And that pipe is about the same size the whole way down the hill until it crosses the park road, goes underneath where everybody's driving, and pops up in the middle of the fountain pool as a tiny little nozzle. It looks like a little traffic cone. You can see it in the summer. And it squeezes all that water into that tiny little space, and the gravitational pull on all the water in the pipe uphill puts a lot of pressure on the water squeezed into that tiny little nozzle. And it sprays the water 50 feet up into the air. In the summer, that water continues to cycle through the pond and slowly drains down towards the Middle Falls. But in the winter, if it's cold, below 32 degrees, the pond will freeze, and the water falling down from the fountain will freeze like a tiny little bubble on top of the ice. Then if it stays cold, which it has this year, maybe another inch will freeze on top of that. Another inch as the water keeps falling down and freezing on top of the ice from the previous day until it climbs all the way up to the top. It's almost 50 feet tall. The ice structure can't get any taller than the fountain can spray, because then it would just freeze around the inside of the ice structure. All these records and documents that we use to figure out how the fountain works aren't just exclusive to us at Letchworth State Park. In fact, I bet you could find some historians and museums around where you live who would show you pictures of what your neighborhood or your house looked like in the 1800s, maybe even earlier. Maybe your building or your house or your street looked completely different back then, or maybe it didn't even exist yet. If you really want to put your Letchworth detective skills to the test, come and find the Glen Iris Fountain in Letchworth State Park. You just enter the cast-style gate and come down the park road, follow signs for the Glen Iris Inn. I'm sure you'll be able to see it even from the road. Well, thank you so much for joining me for today's Letchworth mystery. If you have any questions about the Glen Iris Fountain or other historic sites in Letchworth State Park, please put a comment in the comment section below the video. Share this video with your friends to put their Letchworth detective skills to the test. And as always, like Letchworth State Park's Facebook page to stay tuned for more Letchworth mysteries.